economies and governments can't afford to provide all of the finance that's required for just transition. And a lot of this has got to come from private markets. So that is a very important role that they can play. And the money isn't going to come from other sources.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. We're joined today by Ana Haurie, the co-founder and CEO of Respira International. Respira is a carbon finance business with a focus on nature-based solutions. Ana, thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure to speak to you today. So, as the carbon market is still such a new space and the people working in it have all had very different paths that have led them to it, it's always very interesting to learn how each of our guests found themselves in this sector. And so if you don't mind, it would be wonderful if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what you used to do before Respira.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me this afternoon. I really came to carbon markets by quite an accidental route. My background prior to Respira was very much in financial markets. The business that I had before Respira was a boutique investment bank called Dexian Capital, and we focused on alternative asset classes. I'd also worked at the Bank of England. I started out as a bond broker. So, really quite varied career in finance. I sold my business, Dexian Capital, in 2015. And I found myself sort of kind of in the wilderness years for about 3 years. And in 2018, my fellow co-founder of Respira, Robin Bowie, who was also the person who started Dexian, left that business, and we decided we wanted to do another business. I had been working, though, in the interim with a sustainable logging forestry business and helping them raise operating capital and sort of restructuring. And when Robin and I decided to start another business, we thought that there was an interesting opportunity in sort of decarbonization strategies and transition strategies. And this is around 2018, and there was this sort of a confluence of factors at that time. Not only had we had the Paris Agreement in 2015, increasing reporting requirements through the TCFD, but we also found that there was much more of an acceptance that climate change was real and that we needed to take action on it. And you started to see, civil society start to put pressure on corporates. And then, also at that time we had Extinction Rebellion. Greta was at her height. And I had this realization that actually, we should be looking to find ways of creating the economic incentives to reward nature for the ecosystem services that it provides. And that's how I had a bit of an aha moment. And we decided that we actually wanted to make a contribution towards the fight against climate change. And where we felt that we could make that contribution was by using the financial experience and innovation that we had had in our previous careers and apply that to the voluntary carbon markets. That was a very long answer.
No, but it's a much appreciated one. So as Respira mainly channels funds towards carbon projects in the global south, please correct me if I'm wrong, what would you say are the main challenges that these projects are facing right now?
Lack of capital, lack of investment. I would say that is absolutely the hands down main challenge that they are facing. And that is what we have been trying to address with the business. That is to, raise institutional capital and channel that capital to nature-based projects, predominantly in the global south, because that is where we can get the most sort of immediate impact and bang for our buck, so to speak. Nature can provide 1/3 of the mitigation potential that we need if we're going to make Paris 1.5 degrees. And that is really where we should be focusing a lot of our immediate efforts.
All right. And as far as risks go with these projects, what would you say are the main ones, and how does Respira approach mitigating those?
Well, there is a spectrum of risks. We can start with the fact that a lot of these projects are based in emerging markets and in the global south. So when investors are looking at these regions, they have concerns about political risk or emerging market risk. we're seeing increasingly solutions for this. One of the announcements that came out at the World Bank was that, MIGA is stepping in and providing political risk insurance solutions. So I think that's a hugely positive step. Then other risks that these projects can be affected by, natural sort of catastrophe risks such as fires or floods, which we have been seeing increasingly more of. Again, there are various different ways in which these risks can be mitigated. Obviously, they can't be entirely eliminated, but, the different registries have buffer pools for reversal risk. And increasingly, and sorry to come back to this again, but you're seeing the insurance sector stepping into providing solutions.
It is actually good that you mentioned insurance. I was curious to know if Respira works with any third-party insurers.
Yes, we developed, together with Howden's, the first VCM insurance product that came out about 3 years ago, where we really focused on providing fraud and negligence insurance solutions to a lot of the projects that we were working with. That then spawned the development of it is still small but growing insurance industry around the VCM, where you're seeing more players entering the market and providing insurance solutions for reversal risk, catastrophe risk, as I just mentioned now, political risk. And what this shows is the institutionalization of this sector, because, insurers don't like to insure bad risks. So the fact that you do have insurance products being offered and growing in sophistication, I think is a sort of a good indicator about the fact that a lot of these projects that are able to get insurance cover are of good, high quality and high integrity.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is the partnership with Palladium. I know that together you launched 2 new funds for nature-based carbon credit projects. What can you tell us about this partnership and these 2 funds?
So we partnered with Palladium because they have deep expertise and a deep bench around the world to help us with doing the ESG due diligence on the projects that we're looking to support. They've got a presence in 90 countries. They work with various different governments and essentially can give us, a reach that we as a relatively small business wouldn't be able to achieve on our own. And with the increased scrutiny on, the sort of kind of environmental and social aspects of a lot of these projects, particularly the nature-based ones, we believe that Palladium is a hugely complementary addition to our capabilities, and we're really happy to be working with them. The 2 funds that you referred to, we are in the process of fundraising for those funds, so we haven't actually launched them yet, but hopefully we will do so in the next few months.
Are they in any way different from each other?
Yes. Respira Carbon 2 is aimed at institutional investors, so that fund will generate financial returns for institutional investors. Essentially, we raise capital from these investors. We then use that capital to underwrite and support project developers by giving them long-term offtake agreements or prepayments. We then take ownership of those credits, and then we sell them to corporates who are looking to use carbon credits as part of their decarbonization strategy and generate a financial return. And this is one way of attracting, as I said, institutional capital flows into the global south, which is one of the main sort of ambitions or goals that we have as a business. The other fund is called Respira, and that is more akin to these advanced market commitments that you're seeing increasingly coming to market, where we are looking to bring together a consortium of corporate buyers, and we will originate a portfolio of high quality carbon credits for them, and they take those carbon credits as in specie distributions rather than through financial returns.
Okay, and do you expect these to be launched soon, or do you have any idea at all as to when they'll be ready?
We are aiming to launch them in Q1 or Q2 of next year.
Okay. Wow, exciting. So another question I have for you is, so we've established that you're primarily focused on nature-based solutions, but what is your opinion about tech-based CDR and its potential to have meaningful climate impact?
We need to do everything. And we really don't see this as a zero-sum game where it is, one solution at the expense of the other. We have to do everything. The reason why we're focusing on nature-based solutions is, as I referred to earlier, nature has got the scale to be able to deliver impact now. Deforestation accounts for anywhere up to 10 to 15% of global emissions every year. So if we can tackle deforestation, then we are already, reducing emissions by quite a significant amount. So I think that is why we really need to focus on nature now. But at the same time, CDR and technologies solutions, direct air carbon capture, CCS, etc., are also going to be types of removals that we're going to require. The only issue that we have with them currently is that they're still very much in, development stages. So we don't have the scale or the cost to make these solutions scalable right now, but I'm sure they will, essentially solve for a lot of those problems of scalability and cost over the next few years, and then that will enable us to then have the, permanent removals. That is essentially the holy grail that we're trying to achieve. But the point is that we need to do everything, and it can't be one thing at the expense of another.
Absolutely. Just a quick question back to Respira's approach to carbon projects. How do you vet projects? Like, how do you decide what projects to invest in?
We look to see what the quality of the project developer is in the first instance, where the project is located, what it is trying to achieve, where it is in its development stage, what registry is it planning to issue credits under. And then we'll also look into the background of the project developers. We will do, full KYC, and then we will carry out the in-depth due diligence processes with our partnership with Palladium. But then also we will really focus on the, on the carbon side of the project as well.
Okay, and how do you view co-benefits?
Co-benefits are a very important part of what we're trying to do. I was listening to the CEO of ACME, the African Carbon Markets Initiative, on a panel last week, and he said something that really resonated with me. He was saying that with a lot of these carbon projects, we shouldn't really think of the sort of impact on communities and biodiversity as co-benefits. In fact, those are the primary benefits that a lot of these carbon projects bring, and that the carbon dimension, very, very important, but that is almost the co-benefit to the project. So the impact on communities, the impact on biodiversity, all of that is currently bundled into that carbon credit because, they're not sort of separate. But I would say that I would agree with him. These are primary benefits rather than co-benefits. And that really goes to how we set up our business model in the first instance when we started Respira. We really sort of thought long and hard about how we would price the offtake agreements that we would offer to these developers. And what we felt was the best, most sort of win-win approach that we could take was not only to give a guaranteed floor price for the carbon credits, but also to have benefit sharing arrangements also in place with these projects and with these communities. So as I mentioned, we take ownership of the carbon credits, and then we work with corporates who want to buy them. So when we eventually sell those credits to an end user who's going to retire them, we will then rebate a proportion of the gross margin that we make back to the project, so that those communities can also participate in the development of carbon markets and in, hopefully rising prices.
Okay. Thank you. And while we're on the topic of developing carbon markets, as I'm sure you know that there was an agreement finally reached on Article 6 during COP29 just now, and it's all the talk. So what role do you believe this will have on the VCM and therefore on climate, hopefully in the long run?
I think it's hugely positive that Article 6 was finally agreed, and in particular 6.4, which I can never say that word, is operationalizing the the methodologies, etc., that hopefully will start to get rolled out in 2025. I think they're hoping to have some methodologies approved next year, which would be fantastic. I think this really will underpin a lot of the quality and integrity issues and concerns that some have around carbon projects. So I think it will underpin and bring more confidence to the marketplace, and I think it was a great development.
Absolutely. But I'm also sure you've heard of the criticisms and concerns as to this same development. Particularly, certain NGOs have voiced concerns about the carbon markets now becoming cowboy carbon markets because of the lack of necessary guardrails to ensure credibility. What's your take on that?
We've spent quite a few years now, particularly, these last 4 or 5 years, really looking at the integrity and quality around carbon markets. The scrutiny was necessary, and it has achieved some, really good results. We're seeing improvements in methodologies. We saw the sort of establishment of the Integrity Council for the voluntary carbon markets, who have spent the last 3 years really looking in depth at the different methodologies and how we need to improve what we had before, how we improve, baselines, etc. And they really focus on essentially, this kite mark of quality of the core carbon principles. And they've taken a really long time to get to the point that they've got to. But, there has been so much work that has been done over these last, few years that I wonder whether the motivation of these NGOs is that they're just anti-private markets, anti-carbon markets, full stop, because private finance can play a very important role in mitigating climate change. And if we see one of the effects of Baku was that a lot of the global south countries didn't get the commitments that they were looking for from kind of developed economies. They wanted 1.3 trillion rather than the 300 billion that they got. But the point is that economies and governments can't afford to provide all of the finance that's required for just transition. And a lot of this has got to come from private markets. So that is a very important role that they can play, and the money isn't going to come from other sources. And I can't really wrap my head around why a lot of these NGOs are just so anti the provision of the necessary finance that is needed for these global south emerging economies to enable and bring about this just and fair transition that we all want. And I do think that we should actually put a bit more scrutiny on the motivations of these NGOs and why they're taking the action that they're taking, because it seems like nobody's holding the damages that NGOs are causing to account.
It's my personal opinion, but it does seem like a bit of a hyper focus on quality and not letting, companies get away with greenwashing or anything like that, as opposed to, actually channeling funds towards nature and nature-based solutions and, keeping this whole thing going. But that's just my view.
I would agree with that view. And as I'd said before, the voluntary carbon markets have suffered a significant fall in value and in demand. 2 years ago, what was this market? It was 2 billion. I mean, even at 2 billion, the size of this market is tiny. And now it's about 700 million. We're seeing, corporates actually falling away. The demand is falling away. And who's suffering? Who's paying the price of this? It is actually these communities, not just the communities, but also biodiversity and the complete drying up of really needed finance that should be going to underpinning these projects. And it's not like anyone else is stepping into the gap. So it strikes me that we've just ended up in a position that's just lose. And I really can't see who the winners are. And when these NGOs are sort of, sitting there, do they really think that they've kind of been victorious because they've managed to shrink a really negligent market, a really negligibly small market anyway? I really don't get it. But I do really think that we need to call out these anti-NGOs and hold them to account.
I think it might be a good idea to interview someone from these NGOs and probably get their perspective as to why that's happening. Ana, I do have one final political question to ask you, which is regarding the climate prospects in the U.S. now that Donald Trump has been elected president again. Many are concerned that this may threaten carbon capture and removal efforts and might jeopardize markets. What do you think about this?
I think I'm going to be a bit more of an optimist. I don't really feel like I'm in a position to comment about, Donald Trump, but I was listening to somebody speaking about it yesterday, and they're saying that, I think the thing that we need to really take into account is that, Donald Trump is driven by a domestic agenda and the economy. And I don't think he's really going to take actions that are going to, be damaging towards the domestic economy. A lot of the IRA projects are based in Republican states as well. So I think I'd just rather wait and see for the time, for the time being. And, at the end of the day, it's only 4 years.
That's true. So, Ana, before we wrap up, please let us know what Respira is currently up to and what exciting new announcements we can look forward to in the future.
Well, we are very busy trying to raise these two funds. That is our main focus. The environment is very challenging at the moment. I don't think anyone can sort of deny that. So raising capital is not the easiest activity in the world, but it's a very important one. So we're very focused on doing that. The other activities that we have are becoming very vocal and active on the advocacy and lobbying side to projects that we've been involved with. One is the launch of a market supported but unbranded advertising campaign aimed at corporate CEOs. It's called Reduce and Invest. It's sort of essentially saying, reduce your emissions and invest in climate action, and do both at the same time, because we really need to bring that corporate demand back to the table. And then we're also, very focused on advocacy to make sure that, or to try and ensure that, we have the right regulations and policies that are being implemented in order to keep underpinning the development and growth of voluntary carbon markets.
Excellent. Ana, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on the show today. It was a pleasure to have you, and it was a pleasure to learn about all the important work that Respira is doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.